Welcome, especially if you're listening for the first time. Samuel was the prophet of Israel, and he was also its national leader. He had a curious style of leading because he didn't draw attention to himself. We're going to see in a later chapter how Saul, the man who would be king after him, hardly seemed to know that Samuel even existed. Yet the elders of Israel, the old men who were the leaders of the families who had power in Israel, they knew about Samuel. And when there were troubles in their nation, when there were things that were beyond them to deal with, they would go to Samuel. They would meet him at the places where he went in circuit, at Bethel, at Gilgal, at Mizpah, and at his home in Ramah. And there they would meet with him to discuss the great affairs of their nation. Not that they were a nation like other nations. Samuel did not organize a formal government. He didn't make laws for the people because, after all, the law of God was their law. Samuel remembered that the true king of Israel is God himself, and he would not take the place of God. He was called the judge of Israel, like the judges in the book of Judges. He governed over Israel on God's behalf, and as the rulers came to him, as the elders came to him with their problems, he brought those problems before the Lord in prayer. But those years as prophet and ruler were coming to an end. And they would not come to an end when Samuel died, but rather sooner than that. Not many of us can cope with the failure of our mission. But Samuel, who was great as a prophet and great as a ruler, was even more great in the way that he handled his nation when his own leading of that nation was coming to an end. He remained close to God in prayer. He accepted God's guidance at every point, and he continued to be an inspiration and a teacher to his nation. Even when that nation turned away from God, he would direct them back into the true courses of God, and that after his time as ruler had come to an end. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks, How to Understand the King James Bible, looking at a different chapter each time. And today's chapter is the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 8. We're going to go through this chapter as usual, verse by verse and word by word, seeking to understand its meaning. So please turn with me, if you are able, to the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 8, and we begin as always at verse 1. And it came to pass, when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. When Samuel was old. Oh, we remember Samuel as that boy who heard from God, sleeping or resting in the temple of God. He heard the voice of God, and he was a boy. And we remember his young days and the hope that he would become something great in Israel, and so he did. Israel's prophet, who turned the nation back to God, and then its national leader, who judged Israel and went in circuit from place to place in central Israel, meeting the elders of Israel, discussing their problems, bringing them before the Lord. But now Samuel was old enough to appoint his sons as judges over Israel. In what sense were they judges? Well, the word could be translated governors. And that seems to be the picture here. They're taking on responsibilities, some of the responsibilities of a government. They're taking care of the people. They're responsible for things. They may have made some legal judgments, or they may have made some rules and some laws for the people, but they clearly had authority, and Samuel hoped that they would learn to serve God in the way he had done. Verse 2. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, Abiah. Names have meanings in Hebrew, and so these names also have meanings. What name would Samuel choose for his sons? Joel. It means the Lord is God. The true God is the only real God. Israel's people had often turned aside to false gods, but they may be sure that the only true God, the powerful God who rules heaven and earth, is God alone. Abiah, the second son. His name means God is my Father. Another declaration of faith in God, that God, this same God who rules heaven and earth, the Lord, has a close relationship with his people. He cares for his people. He loves them. He looks after them like a father looks after his child. They were judges in Beersheba. So that's the responsibility that Samuel has given to them. Now, if you look at a map of Israel, you will find that the places where Samuel worked were in the middle of Israel. They were a central area of Israel that he travelled between to organise the government of Israel, to organise how the nation should run. But Beersheba is a place far to the south of those. In fact, it's the southernmost place in Israel. And the fact that they were judges in Beersheba shows that Samuel is seeking to expand the country. He's gaining control over these southern areas. Robbers would often attack the southern parts of Israel, but if there was some sort of organised government there, then it would be easier for Israel's people to become strong, to build walls around their towns and villages, to organise guards to protect themselves. And so this seemed a good plan for government, but verse 3, his sons, Samuel's sons, walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes and perverted judgment. Lucre. It means profit or unjust gain. The love of money is the root of all evil, says 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10. They wanted money. They saw this not as an opportunity to serve God, but an opportunity to make themselves wealthy. So they took bribes. A bribe is just a gift. But a gift is wrong when it's so that you favour the wealthy above the poor. And these sons, they took bribes. They accepted money, and the result was they perverted judgment. Judgment which should have freed the people, which should have ensured that what was right and good was happening, was instead being used to take advantage of people, and especially to take advantage of the weak and the poor who couldn't afford to pay bribes. And this disturbed the elders of Israel, the rulers of families, those who gathering together would rule over towns. Verse 4, then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel and to Ramah. Ramah was the place where Samuel lived, his permanent home. And so they came to him there, verse 5, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. They were saying, we're worried about what's going to happen in our nation. You, Samuel, are going to die, and your sons are not walking in your ways. It's a word picture. We saw it before in verse 3. They're not behaving in the way you behaved. They don't follow the ways of God like you do. Your way is to serve God. Their way is to take advantage of people and to make money for themselves. So they told Samuel, Thy sons walk not in thy ways. Your sons aren't behaving like you. So make us a king to judge us like all the nations. You notice how they say like all the nations and not like all the other nations. Because although I've used the word sometimes, Israel's people did not consider themselves a nation. The nations was the term they used for the other nations, for the heathen nations, for the pagans, for people who opposed the true God. But they wanted a king like those heathen nations. They wanted to be like those powerful nations around them, which got their power from a king. This system, this loose system of government, when they would go and visit Samuel, when there were things to decide, and when Samuel would pray and come back to them with God's message, that no longer satisfied them. They wanted to be like all the nations. Make us a king, they said. But as far as Samuel was concerned, God was their king, and Samuel was their judge. And so for them to say, make us a king, it's like saying, replace God from his position. That's why, verse 6, but the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. Oh, he could have coped if they complained that he was now an old man. He could have coped that they complained that his sons were not loyal to the ways that he had followed. In fact, that distressed him, no doubt, very much. But the thing that displeased him more than anything else in what they said was this, give us a king to judge us. We don't want the Lord still to be the king of our nation. We want a human king, a powerful man, a fierce man. Now, God did have it in his plans to provide a king for Israel. The king of his choice was David, a humble, teachable, obedient man, a man who loved God with all his heart. But it wasn't a king like that the people wanted. They wanted a king who was powerful and proud and fierce. And Samuel prays about this matter to the Lord, and he receives an answer from the Lord in verse 7. And the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. Hearken, listen to what they're saying. Do what they want. Allow them to have what they want. Why? God says, for they have not rejected thee, Samuel, but they have rejected me, the Lord, that I should not reign over them. God says to Samuel, don't think that they're turning away from you, that they're upset with you being the leader or your decisions which you have conveyed to them. No, it's not rejection of you that you're looking at. It's rejection of God. They don't want God to be their king still. They don't trust him to appoint the next leader. Instead, they want to go their own ways. And this is nothing new in Israel, the Lord says, verse 8, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Don't think this is something new. No, God's people have been turning away from God since the days of Moses, since when God, with his mighty hand and his strong arm, rescued them from slavery in Egypt. And God chose them and separated them to be his own nation, his own people. They've wanted to become like the other nations. They've served the gods of those false nations, or rather the false gods of those evil nations. They've turned away and forsaken the true God. This is what's happened in Israel. You can read the history of it in the book of Judges. Yes, people did turn back to the true God at times of revival, at times of the judges of Israel, when they led the people in the right way, and indeed in the life of Samuel. But now it's happening again. The people aren't remaining loyal to the true God. They've got ideas. They want to change their gods. They don't want the true God to rule over them. They want something they can control, something that's in their power. They want false gods. So this is not just about a king. It's about a turning away of a nation from the true God. And don't we see that in many of our nations in the present day? When God has moved so powerfully in previous generations, and yet the new generation, the younger generation, don't want to serve the God of their parents and grandparents. They turn aside and they go their own way. But how does God deal with this? Verse 9, now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and shew them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. Listen to what they say, but make a protest. Make a clear and solemn and serious protest. Show them what's going to happen as a result of their wrong decision. And when someone does something wrong, that's a good rule for us. We warn them maybe that they're doing the wrong thing, that they're acting against what God wants, but when they've understood that, then we don't try and stop them doing that wrong thing. We allow them to do it. We stand back, because that's the way God chooses to deal with people. He doesn't control people. He allows people to go in their own ways, even though sometimes, often, it means God's judgment is against him, against those people. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 9. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine own heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. Do what you want. Enjoy life. But know thou, says the Bible, that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Yes, you can follow your own ways instead of God's ways. And you can chase after what you desire instead of what God wants for you. And God won't stop you usually in that course of action. But be sure there is a judgment against sin and wrongdoing. There is a judgment when people turn away from the living God. But be aware of it. Be warned of it. So Samuel now has to deal with this situation. He's been told by the Lord he must warn the people what it is that their request for a king means for them. Verse 10, and Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. Verse 11, and he said, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. Okay, we've got a description now of duties and tasks and taxes and so on. What does it mean overall? It means you're taking yourselves as free people and you're making yourselves slaves of this king. You want a powerful king. Well, be sure he's not just going to be powerful against the enemies of the nation. He's going to be powerful against the citizens of the nation. You are going to suffer more from this king than ever do your enemies. This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. This will be how he operates. Second half, verse 11. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself. So your sons that are free at the moment, no, they're going to have to work for the king, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen. Literally, the Hebrew there is that they're going to be taken, the sons, for his chariots and for his horses. They're going to have to work to look after the chariots and to look after the horses, and some shall run before his chariots. They'll run ahead. This was in processions. Men went in front of the king's chariot to show how great he was. But also when the king went other places, young men had to run in front of the chariot, announcing the arrival of the king. Verse 12, and he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s. Yes, there's going to be some of these young men who are going to be appointed captains to have important and responsible positions. But there's going to be thousands and 50s of footmen, vast numbers of men who are just going to have to fight and risk their lives and lose their lives at the instructions that this king gives to his captains. Second half, verse 12, and will set them to ear his ground. To ear, to plough, the Hebrew word means, and to reap his harvest. Now you plough your own ground, now you reap your own harvest. But when the king comes, you will be ploughing his ground, and you will be reaping his harvest. And what's more, you will make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. You'll be working hard to make the weapons that he orders and to build these chariots that look so impressive. And so, you see those foreign armies with their chariots and you are so impressed by those chariots. But now your young men are going to have to slave away building those things. And the daughters, they won't escape either. Verse 13, he will take your daughters to be confectionaries and to be cooks and to be bakers. Confectionery in English today means mixing up sweets and making sweets, but at the time of the King James Bible it had a wider meaning, and the Hebrew word that translates is the makers of perfumes and of ointments. They'll be mixing up herbs, the young women, and mixing up spices, and doing everything to make a beautiful palace for your great king, so that your daughters, who now make perfumes and ointments to make themselves beautiful and to get themselves good marriages, no, they'll be doing this to please the king and to please him. And they're going to cook the food for him and for the many people in his palace, and they're going to bake the bread for him. Now you cook food for your own families. Now you bake bread for yourselves. But in the future, it's all got to be for the king, because you are becoming his slaves. And you think you've got possessions now, verse 14. Well, you're going to lose them, because he, the king, will take your fields, your vineyards where the grapes grow, and your olive yards where you grow olive trees, even the best of them, and give them to his servants, who are going to take the harvest on behalf of the king. Everything is for the king. The best olives you grow, the best grapes you grow, aren't going to be yours anymore. They're going to belong to your king. Verse 15, and he will take the 10th of your seed and of your vineyards. He's taking taxes now. And in the modern world, taxes are much more than 10%, aren't they? And he's going to give it to his officers and to his servants. There's a shock in the Hebrew when it comes to the word officers, because the Hebrew word literally means eunuchs, men who've undergone an operation so that they cannot have children, and so that they serve in the female parts of the palace. And this was a custom amongst the heathens, and Israel's people were humiliated and embarrassed even to think about such a thing. But this will be happening in Israel, amongst Israel's families. Men would lose the opportunity to become fathers and have to work in the palace to serve the women who pleased the king. And so it is, the king is taking control in Samuel's description. He's even taking away the servants from the people. Verse 16, and he will take your men servants and your maid servants, the men and the women who serve you, and your goodliest young men, and your asses. He thinks no more of the donkeys than of the best young men, because he's going to put them to his work. They're going to work for him. Verse 17, he will take the 10th of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. That could be translated slaves. And verse 18, ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day. Why? Because you've handed yourselves over, because you've chosen this, and although you pray desperately for God to help against this king, yet the Lord has handed you over to the decision that you have made. Do you really want that? Do you really want to turn aside from having the Lord as your king and instead have a powerful, fierce and cruel man you rule over you? Verse 19, nevertheless the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, nay, no, but we will have a king over us. Verse 20, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us. And we want a fierce king. We want a powerful king. This is what we've chosen. And the proof of it is that we say, end of verse 20, we want our king to go out before us and fight our battles. Yes, we want someone who's fierce and powerful, because we want someone who can defeat our enemies. And what does Samuel do? Samuel, realizing that his time as leader in Israel is coming to an end. Samuel, realizing that the people have turned away from the ways that he has taught them. What does Samuel do? He goes to God. Verse 21, and Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And God answers Samuel second time, verse 22. And the Lord said to Samuel, hearken unto their voice. Yes, listen to them. Do what they are asking. They've chosen this. You've protested. They're still choosing it. Now go and make them a king after their own choosing. A powerful and fierce man must be their king from now onwards. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, go ye, every man unto his city. I'm not doing it now. I'm not doing it this moment. But I am going to seek God for the man who you have chosen to be king, that although the Lord selects this person, he will be a man in accordance with your own desires, a fierce king, a powerful king, a proud king. How terrible it is to want to be like other people when God has made you different in order to bring honour to him. How wonderful it is that even faced with failure, even faced with the end of his leadership, Samuel doesn't turn one little bit from serving God. Samuel remains loyal to God and honourable in every step of the way. And we're going to see in the coming chapters not just how Samuel appoints that fierce and powerful and proud king for them, but also how in chapters to come Samuel will also be called on by God to appoint that humble king, that king after God's own heart. It's coming in future chapters. Well, I'm going to read you now the whole of 1 Samuel chapter 8 so that you can see what you've learned listening to this talk. And first, though, let me give you my email address, 333kjv@gmail.com. I've had some interesting letters in recent weeks from people telling me where in the world they are, or if in the United States, in which part of the United States, letting me know how they're getting on with these talks. And so I hope you will write to 333kjv@gmail.com. And now in conclusion, here's a whole of First Book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 8 in the King James Bible, the KJV. And it came to pass, when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together, and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done, since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me, and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and shew them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told the words of the Lord unto the people that asked him of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands, and captains over 50s, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the 10th of your seed, and of your vineyards, and give them to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants, and your maid servants, and your goodliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work. He will take the 10th of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us, and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken unto their voice, and make them a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, Go ye, every man unto his city.